I'm joined by Mary Holm now. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Jesse.
Great to have you on the show. As always, Mary's our personal finance expert with a very thorny one today. How a retired person can eat their home when they're short of cash but sitting on a house worth sometimes more than $1 million. So, Mary, what to do?
Yeah, sometimes it's 2 million. And by the way, before younger people tune out and say this doesn't affect me, I find when you get into conversation with younger people, they're quite encouraged when they realize there is another way. It's not all about saving a lump sum in KiwiSaver or something like that for retirement. There are other ways as well to make your retirement nicer, and basically it's about one way or another making use of the fact that you're sitting in a house that, is worth, in most cases, $500,000 up to several $1,000,000. And a lot of people have that asset, but they don't have that many savings. So, and there are actually a lot of ways that people can eat their houses, for want of a better expression. One quite obvious way is to take in boarders or flatmates. And, a lot of people just dismiss that. But I might have told you about this before, but I had a friend who for quite a few years in her later life, she lived quite near a university. And so she took in foreign students who lived in the house through the term. And so she got sort of breaks when they went home in the holidays, etc. But she loved it. She said she'd encourage them to cook their own ethnic food. And so she had lots of wonderful exotic food and some really interesting and lively young company. So, there are all sorts of different ways that people can just take in one person or a few people into the house and boost their income that way, which is cool.
Yeah.
Another one is subletting part of your house, either get someone and make the downstairs into a flat or something like that, or do Airbnb, which once again can be quite fun. People find with Airbnb they might get overseas visitors, all sorts of people passing through. It's interesting. Obviously there might be security issues in some cases, but these are possibilities that can actually not only bring you money, but bring you some interesting company as well.
Yeah, opens your life up a wee bit, right? Gives you a bit of company and interest. Yeah, possibility.
Yes. Yeah. So those are all possibilities. Another is subdividing your land, and there's still a lot of people in New Zealand sitting on, not so many on quarter-acre pavlova paradises now, but eighth of an acre or, quite big sections. And it used to be that it was really quite hard to subdivide and perhaps build another house and then sell that, or just subdivide off and sell the land. But that's got easier and easier as cities around the country are encouraging people to infill housing, etc. I think you've got to get lawyers involved and all that. It's a bit of a labour to do it, but that can free up, a lot of money, because the typical New Zealand house that might be worth about $1 million, a lot of that is the land. It's, often way over half the value of the whole property is the land. So that's certainly something for people to look into.
Presumably that would cut down on your rates bill as well, which can be a big pain at that stage of life.
Good point. And while we're talking about rates, I didn't include this in the list, but some city councils will let people on whatever their income and whatever their wealth do rates postponement, so they don't actually pay their rates until the house is sold. So there's a sort of debt building up against the house.
Yes.
And when the house is sold. In some cities you can only do it if you're on a lower income, but that will apply to many people too. And in fact, there's also some places, or quite often, just you can get off paying rates altogether if you're in quite dire straits financially. But the rates postponement is more that you just don't have to pay them now, and so that the debt builds up until the house is sold. But that
And
can
very
really
hard, sorry to interrupt, very hard to
no,
imagine
that's
that
right.
the debt would ever build up higher than your house would be appreciating in
Oh
value.
yes. With something like rates, yes. I mean, it's a few thousand a year, and even if the house is one of the lower priced $500,000 houses, it's not gonna it's not gonna total anything like that. Unless you live to about 200 perhaps. But another couple of ideas one is to which a lot of people consider, is to sell your home and buy a cheaper one, either a smaller one or one in a cheaper suburb or a cheaper town, and that's obviously there's a lot of people out there who've done that, who've freed up $500,000 or whatever by moving to a smaller town. One suggestion about that, though, that I've learned from my Herald column and people's letters in about it, is to go and rent in a smaller town first before you buy there, because sometimes the locals aren't all that friendly to new people, and sometimes people say sometimes the medical care is not as good as they had hoped in smaller towns, if they get any complicated health issues, or so that's not the sort of panacea, but it can work well for quite a few people. One elderly woman I was talking to said she moved down, I think it was from Auckland to Whanganui, I think, and she said, well, I thought I wouldn't see so much of the grandkids, but I've freed up so much money that I can just pop on a plane whenever I like and fly back up to Auckland and go and stay the weekend and catch up with the grandkids. So, there are lots of different ways of making this work if you want to. One couple once wrote to me and said they were thinking of selling their house and then just becoming renters through until they died, which is another interesting possibility. Most people wouldn't want to do that. If you've got your own home, most people, especially by the time they get to retirement, like the security of owning their own home. But this couple said, well, we can do a lot of travel and pay our rent till we die with the money we're going to free up by selling. So, there are all possibilities that a lot of people don't even think about. And then the one that is perhaps the one that's most discussed is getting a reverse mortgage, and there's quite a lot of misunderstanding about this. And people say to me, no, you don't do that. It's a terrible thing to do. But that's not true. It's terrible if it's done wrongly. But like what you're basically doing is, if you've got no mortgage or only a small mortgage, you can borrow back money against your house, so that it's like getting money from the bank and making no payments back until the house is sold or until you die. And what you've got to remember, of course, is that the interest, you're paying no interest, no repayments and no interest. So that means the loan does grow fast over the years because it compounds. So, for example, I've got an example here that if you were paying, say, 7% on a reverse mortgage and you borrowed $10,000, after 20 years, that will be $40,000, so that's what can happen. Loans can quadruple or more over long periods. So you want to be doing it only, use up all your savings first. You don't want this reverse mortgage to sit around for decades. Ideally, it's best if you do it later in life. So if you use up your savings by the time you're 75 or 80, let's say, or ideally perhaps even older than that, then you can get the reverse mortgage, and you're probably not going to live more than 10 or 20 more years after that. So it's not going to compound terribly much. And it's what you've got to remember too is, when you're looking at, okay, the loan might grow quite a lot especially if it runs for 20 years or more, but the value of your house is going to be growing at the same time. No, maybe not this year, but most years, on average, house prices have always grown and always will, at least with inflation, but they've always grown faster than inflation, and that's almost certain to continue. And what I recommend people do if they're thinking about this idea is to go on the Heartland Bank website. They've got they offer reverse mortgages. They and SBS are, I think, the only two banks offering them at the moment. Different banks offer them at different times. The Heartland Bank's got a really good calculator where you can put in your age and the rough value of your property and how much you might want to borrow, and it'll tell you sort of how the loan's likely to work out over the years. And you can play around and change, say, oh, maybe I'll do it a bit when I'm a bit older. The age, by the way, the banks won't lend you a very big proportion of your property value when you're 65, but it increases. I think, for example, at 70, you can typically borrow about 20 to 30% of the value of your house. And then as you get older, they'll let you borrow more because of the compounding. There's less time for the loan to compound too much. So it's a pretty, another really important point is don't borrow more than you need right now because the interest compounding on it all. So they'll let you set it up where you might supplement your New Zealand super with perhaps $100 a week coming in on a reverse mortgage, or $200 a week, something like that, to help you go. And then if the roof suddenly starts leaking or you need to get a new car or something, you can add another lump sum then. But you can just borrow the money as you need it. So you don't want to be borrowing 100,000 and having that sitting around in the bank in the meantime, because you'll be earning 2% on it and meanwhile paying 7 or 8% on the loan. So that's not a good idea. But it works pretty well, and a lot of people find it is sort of freeing them up from one of the worries. We're running out of time here, aren't we? How are we doing for time, Jesse?
Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes.
Couple more minutes. An issue about this is whether you tell the children, because the kids are quite often sitting around expecting that when you die, they'll, this nice family home that's worth $1 million, there's 2 kids, they'll get $500,000 each. Not a bad idea to just tell them this is going on so that they don't get a horrible shock and feel hacked off with you after you die. But I always maintain, if the kids are not supportive of you doing this, then they don't deserve to inherit anyway. I mean, it's your money, and why shouldn't you be enjoying some of the value of the house in retirement? And, the chances are there'll still be quite a big inheritance for the kids. So I think, in most families, I'd like to think the children will say, yes, mum and dad, go ahead and borrow $50,000 and go on a wonderful trip or whatever. But that's something people have got to consider, whether they tell the children and how the kids are likely to react. But generally speaking, I would say it's a really good backup for very old age. And if you sort of, personally, I think if I ever do retire, that I'll plan to spend my money by the time I'm, say, 90, and then get a reverse mortgage to supplement New Zealand super, although by that age, a lot of people say super's enough for them. And for younger people, for people who are 70, 65 or 70 and haven't got any savings, as long as you don't run up huge, big amounts, it is a way of supplementing your super and living a nicer life, and why not?
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Well, when you're 90, you'll still be welcome on my show every couple of Thursdays, dispensing your wisdom. Thanks very much for this one. I know there'll be lots of people out there who got a lot out of it. Cheers.